All right, good morning. Welcome to Starlight Sprint 4 review. Super excited today because we actually have a lot to share. So just to really quickly go through high-level accomplishments and goals of the sprint. The goal of the sprint, as has been for the last few sprints, has been to get the Starlight code deployed to both of our campuses' staging servers and the UCSB production environment. Also testing out, specifically for this one, testing out all of the new features that have been developed in a staging environment, starting to work on custom theming for the campuses, and also getting Shibboleth set up as the single sign-on authentication. And in general, all of these sprints so far have been in support of having initial instances of the Spotlight platform in production for both campuses. So really quickly, our accomplishments. This is really exciting deployment. We have successfully deployed to the staging environment to UCSB using database authentication. This is really awesome. We have not yet been able to deploy using Shibboleth, but what I understand from Matt is that UCSD is incredibly close to deploying using Shibboleth on their staging server, possibly as soon as today. So that's really, really awesome. And the configuration for the deployments was consolidated into environment variables. And so this was the method that we used here at UCSB for our staging deployment. We also, and I think this is really important to highlight, some of the feature work that we've been doing has required some upstream contributions, and I want to pull that out both because I think it's really important that to highlight that we are contributing back to the larger Spotlight community with some of the work that we're doing. But also I think it's always important to know anytime that we're contributing upstream, there are sometimes delays because we're having to wait for people outside of our team to review that work. So that first upstream contribution was to update the latest version of Spotlight in our AAAF, and this included a fix by Alex that supports displaying PDF image derivatives in the Spotlight user interface. So I'll demo that in a little bit. We also, as part of the work we did in this sprint, started looking at theming in Spotlight, and we discovered some things about how theming works as opposed to how views work, and I'll show this also in the demo. But basically what we determined based on the testing is that we really have a need for something called a global theme. And so Alex has also been doing work to submit that upstream to Spotlight to support that for the community. Because we finally had the code deployed on a staging environment, we were able to test a lot of the new features that had been developed over the course of the past 4 sprints. Ideally, we'd like to be testing these on both the UCSB and UCSD staging environments, so that will be happening in the next sprint as soon as that environment's up. But just really briefly, we confirmed that we're able to perform a batch ingest from a local library server as opposed to having to put the files out on a web server somewhere with a URL that could be consumed. We also confirmed that users can upload PDFs individually using the add item screen, that PDFs can be brought in also during a batch upload, that PDFs are displayed correctly in that main object view. Derivatives are now being created, and the derivative function is working well in widget. So all of this I will show you in a few minutes. We also updated Rails to the latest version to address some security vulnerabilities. And then finally, a good thing to note is even with all this work going on, actually all of the team was out. The first week of the sprint, Tom, myself, and Alex were all up at LTCX. Matt was on vacation, if he wants to call it that. And one of the things that happened at LTCX was a Spotlight community conversation where we learned a lot of interesting things about the history of Spotlight, mainly that it mainly has been Stanford that developed that code. And there hadn't really ever been any sort of community conversations around developing a collaborative roadmap or really even opening that conversation up And so what we determined had happened is that there are a lot of forks in the Spotlight community where individual institutions have done some work to add features for their local environments, but that hasn't really been shared back with the rest of the community usually. And so one of the things that we talked about there was just putting together some initial efforts, if not as like an official community roadmap, but at least to start learning about what all of the other institutions in the Spotlight community want to see as feature enhancement. What code they've already implemented locally because of their stakeholder needs, and then any sort of locally used tools or plugins that they're using in addition to the core Spotlight code. So far, most of the information in here is just from Kathy at Stanford. She's shared this with me. I'm going to go ahead and add in the work that we've done as part of this collaboration here. This is then going to be shared out with the larger Spotlight community for them to add their own information. And this is one of the things that I'm hoping we can talk about in our stakeholder meeting in a few weeks, is to go through this and see if there's any other of these features out there in the community that are also of interest to us, because this allows us to start actually reaching out to other institutions to see maybe if we can do some co-development in this area. So that's really exciting. So did we set out everything that we wanted to accomplish? We are so close. I really wish that we could say yes. It's really that we have deployed to UCSB servers only to staging, not to production, and not with Shibboleth. Like I mentioned, UCSD is very close to deploying to their staging site with Shibboleth. But this was really, I think, really getting this out there, getting it onto a staging environment has been really great in terms of actually allowing us to test some of these new features. We did discover some bugs as part of that process, and we're continuing to work on refining themes, especially in order to support us not having to have forked code, and also just getting the themes to sort of function appropriately. So you'll see when I do the demo that things are not yet perfect for the UCSB theme, but we are getting much closer, which is exciting. Matt, did you have anything to add before I jump in?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it.
Awesome. And are there any stakeholder questions before I dig into the demo? Awesome. So I'm super excited. I'm already, so this is, you'll see is, and can everyone see this okay? Should I make it bigger? Is that better? Okay. So you'll see that I'm at spotlight.library.ucsb.edu. I'm logged in already, so you don't have to see me struggling to type in passwords. It's important to note that I'm logged in right now as a super admin, because that gives me the permission to create new exhibits and also to customize the appearance of the entire site. Generally, most users wouldn't be given super admin permissions. At the exhibit level, you can have admins for individual exhibits and also curators for each exhibit. And so if someone is logged in with that, they're not necessarily going to see all of these screens. But what I thought I would do is actually walk us all through creating a new exhibit from scratch. And along the way, I'm going to highlight some of the work that we've been doing specifically as part of this collaboration. So please bear with me. I have stuff on lots of screens. And I have a little script that I'm having to refer to. So the first thing I'm going to do is click this Create a New Exhibit button. I'm just going to enter a quick title here, which is Demo 4 for Sprint Floor. The title can be changed later. It's always good to note that the URL slug cannot be. So this is something you want to think carefully about before you create it. I'm also going to add a few tags here, primarily so that I'll be able to show you how this functions a little bit later at the end of the demo. So now I'm going to click Save. This has now created my new exhibit and put me directly into my curation dashboard for that exhibit. I always like to approach building a new site, and it may be that I'm biased because I'm a metadata librarian, but I always like to start by customizing the metadata. But this is also because before you add items, you really want to make sure that you've set up your metadata fields. So I'm going to go into this configuration metadata, and you'll see out of the box, there's actually 5 fields that are standard. The one you're not seeing is title, and title displays everywhere. I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of exhibit specific fields. The first one I'm going to add is format. And ideally, I want this to be a controlled vocabulary field because I'm going to put controlled vocabulary terms in there. We did discover that there seems to be a bug. We think maybe a Spotlight-wide bug where when you are adding something as controlled vocabulary, it's not indexing unless you sort of force it at the end. And so we have that captured as work we need to do. So for the time being, I'm going to leave this as free text. Once I add my objects, I'll go back and switch it to controlled vocabulary. That forces the indexing. So I'm going to save this. I'm also going to add another field just for source. And this one is going to be controlled vocabulary or a free text, so I won't have to do anything later. The other thing you can do from this screen is you can turn on and off where different metadata fields display throughout the site. I know in my sample metadata, I don't have any descriptions or attributions, so I'm just going to turn those off everywhere. This prevents us from displaying sort of blank fields across the site and keeps the site looking a little neater. But one of the cool things is you can, if you want things, extra fields to display in particular views, it's really easy to turn that on from this screen. Okay, so now I am ready to go ahead and add some items. And you'll see here I don't have any items added yet because it's brand new. If I click add items, the first thing I'm going to do is to upload multiple items. So I'll just go to this upload multiple items tab. One of the things that's really cool is comes standard out of the box is I can download a template for my metadata fields. I'm going to go ahead and open this because I think this is really great. I hope you're not opening in that thing they want you to open in. Stop. All right, so you can see here along the, let me zoom that in a little bit. Oops, that does not work. So you can see here along the top that these are actually Solr fields, but you'll see there's one for URL, the description, the attribution. The thing that I think is really cool is here are my format and source fields that I just added. And so that's the nice thing about adding in your metadata fields before you start adding items is it automatically will add it to your batch upload template. So it's really a great thing to start so that you don't have to see me typing into this spreadsheet. I actually have one that I've created for this batch with the same fields. The one thing that I do want to note is you'll see that there's this URL here in column A. And if I was uploading a batch from an image server, I would want this to say URL. Because I'm using a file server, we actually need to change this to say file. And that way it knows to go out and look for something on one of our servers. So this is the only modification that you should have to do to this batch spreadsheet based on where you're uploading the content from. I'm going to go ahead and not save my changes and choose a file. So I have this Spotlight batch test. This has, I believe, 8 images in it. These are all TIFFs that exist on our library file server. You can see them here. So digitization, DPS store, ADRL. And so these are a bunch of TIFF files. I'm gonna go ahead and click open, and then I just hit add item, and it's just gonna work in the background. And so as it's continuing to add stuff, I'm gonna go ahead and demo uploading individual items. But as we start checking back, we should start seeing some of those items appearing in the background. So now what I'm gonna do while we wait for that is to work on uploading some of these PDFs. So I have a couple that I've already added into my demo folder. And I'm just gonna go ahead and cut and paste metadata so you don't have to see me type. And I can either click add item here or add item and continue adding, because I have another PDF. I'm just gonna click this add item and continue adding. And it's just thinking down at the bottom. Guess it didn't want that. Maybe something that we need to look into, why it didn't give me another screen, but that's okay. I'll go ahead and add my second one. Click add item. Sorry, we're just waiting a second here for it to continue to add those items. I'm on my home Wi-Fi, so hopefully, I was testing this out yesterday at the library and it was blazing fast. So I'm guessing that this is just a problem. It's a little bit slow on my home. Let's go back. All right, so it didn't like that last item. I think it may have timed out on my Wi-Fi. But you can, in the meantime, see here that we've added all of those image items that I had added previously are there. And then I also have a PDF with a thumbnail as opposed to a black box, which is very exciting because this works as of this morning. So I'm gonna go ahead and skip adding that second PDF item and just continue on with the demo. But I do wanna just show you really quickly what these image items look like. So when we open it up, you do have all of the metadata here. You have the options to bookmark it, email it, cite it. You can zoom in, you can sort of move around. You can also download or rotate the images as well. That's pretty cool. Let me go back to the PDFs. So here is a 6-page PDF. And so from this screen, you can zoom in. You can also get sort of the full image fit to width, and then also scroll through and see all of the pages of the PDF in the window, and also download it directly to your computer or print it. One of the things that we do want to get some feedback from you all in a little bit is if you'll notice this eagle, there's a masthead up at the top here. But when the derivative was created, it cut off the masthead, and we're not quite sure why that happened. So we did want to get some feedback from you all about that issue to sort of see what our options are there. I'll talk a little bit later about how Spotlight works in terms of some of the widgets and things that we can do to work around that, at least in the short term. All right. So what I'm going to do now is to actually start building my site out now that I have some items there. So I am going to go back now into my metadata and change my format back into a controlled vocabulary. That way it's available to me as a facet when I do a search. Oops, I have to turn that on. So I'm going to go ahead now and turn on format as a facet. So now I have this format facet here, although it did not. Index my photographs. Right. Sorry about that. It seems I had a problem with my, I think when I set up my batch ingest, I had my format turned on as a controlled vocabulary field. And so in the demo, because I had it still set up as free text, it's actually a different Solr index than the one that I had prepared. So I'm just gonna go through and add really quickly photographs as a format. I won't do it to everything because it's really boring to sit here and watch me edit metadata. But I do want to be able to show you that now we have 4 photographs. And we also have newspapers here as a facet. So one of the things that you do to start building the site is you can perform searches and then save those searches. And those allow you to do things in some of the widgets and also the browse pages in order to help guide users into viewing certain sets of content. So I'm just going to quickly save a couple of searches so I can show you how that works. I'm going to save both my newspaper search. I'm also going to save my photograph search. All right, so now if I go back to my exhibit dashboard, I'm just going to start building out the pages of my site. So the first one that I'm going to build is my home page. And you can just click edit here. And I have some text that I'm just going to pop in. I'm also going to add in a widget. So all of the widgets are available just by clicking that blue plus button. These standard widgets are things that are working either with text or things outside of the site. The exhibit item widgets are ones that are actually working with the items that you have uploaded to the site. And so I'm going to go ahead and add just one of those, maybe this item row. And here you can just search for things that you've added to your site. So I'm just gonna quickly select a few of these just to show you what that looks like. You can turn on and off whether or not you want captions to display and secondary captions. And if you wanted to have text displaying to one side or the other, you could add that in here. I'm just gonna save my changes. And so now you can see I have a home page that I have added 2 of the same image to. If I click on one of these images, I go directly to that item page, which is pretty nice. Now I'm going to go back to my exhibit dashboard, and I'm going to go ahead and add in these browse pages. So by default, Spotlight has all exhibit items, but you can see here, these are my 2 saved searches. One for photographs, one for newspapers. I can choose to add these as a browse category. There's also a save searches widget that I can also have a separate set of searches that they show up there. So if I want to say, do a search for photographs of students and have some narrative text around that. I can save that search and embed it into my page. From here, you can also edit these. So I'm going to turn all of these on. And if I go to this browse page here, you'll see all of these just sort of show up with these default images. If I go back and edit each of these, I can actually set that thumbnail from an image in this browse category in my exhibit. And then you can just go in to this image viewer and sort of drag around how you want it to be cropped. And hit save, and then this is going to be the thumbnail that displays in the browse page. One of the things that we needed to do as part of supporting the PDFs was that derivatives, and so I just wanted to show you that if I go over now to the Eagle, I now have my PDF is available to crop. And so, which is really cool. If I hit save changes, you'll now see that there's text there. The other thing that you can do, at least with the browse widget, is rather than using something that's uploaded to the exhibit, you can actually upload a separate image. And so I've just created one here really quickly to show you what this would look like. So say you actually want it to be an image and not text, because text isn't always that compelling. This is actually part of the masthead from that Eagle newspaper, and I'm just going to save my changes, and you can see I can have an image for that instead. So there's some flexibility with textual content if you want to go ahead and use the derivatives that is created by the system, or if you want to go ahead and add in external content. It's not available in all of the widgets. The one where it's where it's treating the item as an item itself. But for any ones where it's this group of objects, you can always upload external images. And that's true for photographs as well. You don't have to use an image that you've uploaded to the site for these thumbnails. I'm just gonna, so it looks nice, I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing for all of the exhibit items. And save changes. So now you'll see if I go back to my browse page, now I have some really nice browse thumbnails that I can present to my users. Really quickly, I'm going to build out a features page. So this is where in the site you could add additional interpretive text. I'm just going to add a new page really quickly, which is going to be a biography of Anna S.D. Blake. This is how you would sort of turn on and off the page. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on, and then I'm going to edit it. I have some pre-populated text here. But what I'm going to do is to actually use one of these widgets. So I'm going to do the item embed. I'm going to find my portrait of Anna Blake. And then I'm going to add in the biography there and have it display, the text display on the right-hand side. So I'll go ahead and save my change there. And you can see now I have my nice image. I can zoom in on it, but I also have the text displaying to the right. Oops, I put in the wrong text. That's okay. As you can see how easy it is to just go in and actually put in the biography you meant to put on. So finally, I'm just going to go back to my exhibit dashboard and add the last type of page that's built in, and that's this about page. This works the same way as adding the feature pages. So I can just say about the exhibit, click save, go ahead and turn the page on, save the changes, and then I'm going to edit it. And I'm just going to add in this text here about where the exhibit items are from and who curated it. The other thing that I really like about these about pages, and this is just out of the box with Spotlight, is you can add in contact information. So I'm going to go ahead and add in the contact information for one of the curators. And you can also upload an image of them. So this is Sarah Case. And you're able to crop that and click save. You can add as many contacts as you want. But now when I go to my About page, you'll see over on the left-hand side, I have this nice contact page. And now if you go back to your home page, you see it, as I've sort of added things, it's added them to the top bar. And I can just click through, and I'm pretty quickly building out a pretty good exhibit site. All right, so now I'm just gonna go in and do some final configurations. I'm gonna go through and just change my title from Demo 4 to a better title. You can also add in a subtitle. And I'm also gonna, at this point, add in a description, and I'll show you where this will appear. The other thing that I really like is that you can add in contact emails. And this is when I go to, when you actually see the contact us label on the site, if somebody has a question about the exhibit, when they click that, it will actually send an email to the one that's specified for the exhibit. So if you have an exhibit that's curated by your special collections department and another one that's curated by your history department, you can set up separate contact emails for those separate exhibits. I'm also, so I'm gonna save the changes. And now I'm also gonna publish this. Well, I'm gonna hold off on publishing it for just a second because I do wanna show you the appearance piece. So if I click over here, you'll now see that there's two exhibit themes. There's this default, which is what we're currently using, and now we have a UCSB theme. So I'm gonna go ahead and click that and save the changes, and you'll notice that the theming on the site has now changed to the new UCSB branding. This is still a work in progress, but now it's actually starting to look much more like how we would want our site to look. I'm going to go back over to general now and go ahead and publish this and save it. And I'm going to go back to our home page in a different browser. Where I'm not logged in. So because I only have one published exhibit, it goes directly to that exhibit as a home page and retains the theming that we want it to retain. But this is what we're trying to work on with the global theming. You'll see if I go back to actually, I'm gonna go, before I do that, I'm gonna go back to my published exhibit and give this a thumbnail. All right, so now I'm gonna go back to my home page. So you can see here I have my one published exhibit, and in my non-logged in page, it's retaining the theming that I've added. If I go back and I publish one of these other exhibits, even though it also has the same theming, when I refresh over here, save changes. So now I have my two published exhibits. you'll see that the theming has now reverted back to the default. And so when we talk about there isn't support right now for global theming, this is what we mean. As long as you only have one exhibit, your exhibit theming extends to the entire site. If you have more than one exhibit, sorry, coughing fit. If you have more than one exhibit, it reverts back to sort of the standard view and you lose that theming. And so that's the work that Alex has been working on with the community, is to allow us to extend an exhibit level theme and have it carry on through the entire site. The way that the current Spotlight code is set up is you actually have to hard code that sort of exhibit wide view in the code itself, and then individual exhibits, if you want special colors or special fonts, you override it through the theming. But the problem with that in the context of Surfliner is because we're trying not to maintain separate forks of the code, we actually want to be able to control the look and feel of the site through themes so that they can just be turned on and off in the interface. So we are working on being able to use that theme everywhere. And we believe you'll still be able to have individual themes if you want for the individual exhibits, but this way we'll be able to just set a global theme for each campus without having to fork the code in order to do that. So I think that is it in terms of the demo, unless Matt or Alex or Tom, you can think of anything I didn't show off.
No, I think this is great, Chrissy.
Okay. Stakeholders, did you have any questions about any of the stuff that I showed you? Or any feedback about the work that the team has been doing? I'm happy to stop recording if you would like me to do that. Why don't I do that? Okay, so just to wrap up for today, in our next sprint, we are going to continue to push towards getting this deployed UCSD in their staging server with Shibboleth. And also continuing to work with the UCSB campus to get UCSB set up using Shibboleth locally as well. As I mentioned, we deployed using database auth to staging, which from a security standpoint isn't necessarily our favorite idea in a production environment. It certainly works for testing and being able to get things out. So hopefully we'll be able to get the Shibboleth resolved soon with our campus. And get that actually deployed to our production environment. We're also going to be looking at using, turning the deployments. Right now we're using something called Ansible and looking at actually containerizing those using Rancher. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, Rancher, and which itself uses Kubernetes.
And then the other thing we're going to continue to work on is the theming. David at UCSD has been already working on developing a UCSD theme. And we are going to continue to work, once we have that custom or the site-wide global theme available, we're also going to continue on working on implementing the new UCSB branding guidelines for the site. And work in conjunction with Jonathan and Rick in Outreach to make sure the site's looking the way it needs to look. So that's all work that's planned for Sprint 5. Please do feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or any additional feedback. But otherwise, thanks for coming. Okay, so just to wrap up for today, in our next sprint, we are going to continue to push towards getting this deployed UCSD in their staging server with Shibboleth. And also continuing to work with the UCSB campus to get UCSB set up using Shibboleth locally as well. As I mentioned, we deployed using database auth to staging, which from a security standpoint isn't necessarily our favorite idea in a production environment. It certainly works for testing and being able to get things out. So hopefully we'll be able to get the Shibboleth resolved soon with our campus and get that actually deployed to our production environment. We're also going to be looking at using, turning the deployments. Right now we're using something called Ansible and looking at actually containerizing those using Rancher. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, Rancher, and which itself uses Kubernetes.
And then the other thing we're going to continue to work on is the theming. David at UCSD has been already working on developing a UCSD theme. And we are going to continue to work once we have that custom or the site-wide global theme available. We're also going to continue on working on implementing the new UCSB branding guidelines for the site. And work in conjunction with Jonathan and Rick in Outreach to make sure the site's looking the way it needs to look. So that's all work that's planned for Sprint 5. Please do feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or any additional feedback. But otherwise, thanks for coming.